Yesterday, the Oklahoma Sooners picked up a commitment from four-star linebacker Kip Lewis, commitment number 9 in this class, pushing them to top 5 in the nation. And we need to talk about it because this is going to be an insanely competitive year for recruiting. But before we hop into that, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe that the Oklahoma Sooners are going to be able to finish the year with a top 5 recruiting class? And let me know what you're thinking there, because we're going to get into that in this video. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification, because I do constant college football content, and I'm on my push to 5,000 subscribers in my first year of having a YouTube channel. I'm actually under 400 away, and we have just under a month to go. I'd love to have you along for that journey, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below, because those interactions are huge for content creators like myself, getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said and out the way, first and foremost, let's talk Kip Lewis. And Kip Lewis is an individual who I think we could see rise into the top 300, currently sitting at 325, and he's someone who I think could come into the Sooners and make an instant contribution. Now, I don't know that he makes an instant contribution at the inside linebacker or outside linebacker position. 24/7 Sports has him as an outside linebacker, but he really, I think, is probably going to move inside in college. He is very natural at the inside linebacker position, very instinctual there, and I think that he will ultimately play there. But where I do think he'll contribute immediately is special teams. And when you watch the film on Kip Lewis, that's something that stood out to me. That when he was on special teams, it's not only that he was doing it and succeeding, he was taking pride in it. That sort of mental attitude is what translates to college football, and that's why I am a little bullish that I think this kid is going to be someone who we're hearing his name very early in Norman because of his contributions to the defense, because of his contributions to special teams. I think this kid has a place in a lot of different locker rooms across college football, and a place for him very early. And I think one of the plays that really caught my eye, a kickoff return where he was defending and he stayed true to his lane. And the kickoff return man caught the ball and instantly kind of started breaking it to the opposite side of the field. The entirety of Kip's team over-pursued to that way, except Kip. And so when this kid broke it back opposite side of the field and started running against the grain, the only way that the touchdown was prevented was because one person stayed home, and that was Kip Lewis. And the reason why that's big, I know that sounds like it's menial and trivial, but that shows discipline. And that's the sort of discipline in a young player that translates, especially when you're going to be putting that guy as one of the quarterbacks of your defense, possibly at that linebacker position, especially with OU, how they like to run the linebacker position. That right there is something you're very excited about. He's incredibly athletic, but I think the mental side is where I'm really high on this kid. This is someone who's going to contribute early. But the Oklahoma recruiting class as a whole is filled with guys that you have to be very, very high on. Aside from having the number 1 receiver in the nation, you also have the number 1 center in the nation, Demetrius Hunter. Now, we've talked about this before. He's currently rated as a 3-star prospect, but that's someone who's going to rise into a 4-star prospect. I would be shocked if at the end of this process he wasn't rated as a 4-star. And likewise, Raleek Brown, when I did the video on him, he was rated as a 5-star, but because he lived in California and they didn't get to have a season at the same time everyone else is, he's behind on his evaluation. So while everybody else has been evaluated from their junior season, he hasn't. So they were able to give evaluations. Some people rose, and he will undoubtedly be rising back into 5-star range after the season is over for him, after they have that junior year tape. He will be back in 5-star range. I have no doubt about it. And in the off chance he isn't, he's still a 5-star talent all day long. Every school in Power 5 would take him today if he wanted to go to their institution. He is that good. You have a weapon, and y'all already know how I feel about him. I think that that was a home run hit specifically for the Sooners. But that class is going to rise with the rise of Hunter into 4-star range, which I would bet right now is going to happen. I feel very adamantly about that. He's very talented. He will be a 4-star. Whether he gets into top 300, I don't know. I think that could be a push, but he's going to be a 4-star. He's a 4-star talent, no doubt about it. Number 1 center in the nation. Book it. I think Brown, like I said, will go back into 5-star after the Matter Day season is complete, after he gets his evaluation. But this is the one area I don't envy being these recruiters or working for these recruiting services, because I can't just imagine how hard it is to try and weigh a kid who is a 5-star talent in Raleek Brown, but he didn't get to play at the same time everyone else is. That's not his fault. There is nothing he could do to control that. but you can't penalize kids who did play and who did have phenomenal seasons and who have garnered that 5-star. But at the same time, you can't punish Raleek Brown because he couldn't play. It was no fault of his own, no choice of his own. There was nothing he could have done about the situation. And because of that, you're really put into this hard position of between a rock and a hard place where you have to acknowledge the kids that did play and you have to give them their props, but you can't punish the kids that didn't play because they couldn't through no fault of their own. That being said, at the end of all this, Raleek Brown is going to be a 5-star prospect again. And then outside of that, you look at the Sooners class moving forward and you're in it for a lot of blue chip guys. If we're really just focusing on the 5-stars right here, Gavin Sawchuk is a guy who will probably be back into 5-star range. Then outside of that, you have Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, who you're going to be competing with. Alabama's really starting to warm up on him. Clemson's interested. That's going to be a battle, but he is a legacy to OU. You always love that. He's going to be coming to Oklahoma at some very loaded weekends that are going to prove big ultimately in the battle for Brownlow-Dindy, and because he's going to be at OU for those weekends, the guys he's around, I think OU lands Brownlow-Dindy. But that being said, you're also in it for Amari Abor. You're also in it for Gentry Williams. The one question I've had consistently with Gentry Williams, and I think a lot of the OU fans, y'all have been great in understanding my point on this. As much as I think OU is in the lead with Gentry Williams, and I absolutely think that he's an OU commit, I think he's going to end up at the University of OU, he has said it kind of depends on how much they're able to progress the defense this year under Grinch. Now, the reason why I do believe he ends up at OU is because y'all have heard me multiple times. I think this Grinch defense is progressing in the right direction. I like the pieces you have. I like what I saw on the spring game, and I think it is going to continue progressing. It's been no secret how I felt about the Oklahoma defense and its ability to move forward. That's why I do think you're ultimately able to get Gentry Williams, but at the same time, we've talked about LSU and their ability to go out and get the top DBs in the nation, because when we're talking about LSU, we have to talk about Corey Raymond, and Corey Raymond has a laundry list of first-round prospects he's put into the draft at the DB position, right? There's really nobody in the nation who has the same list Corey Raymond does. There are people that have comparable lists, but there's nobody that you can really just turn to and say they have a better list, right? And that's saying something. That guy right there is the real deal. He's somebody that, me as a Bama fan even, when I hear that we're up against LSU for a corner, I'm like, yeah, that's a coin flip. We have Saban, they have Corey Raymond. The difference is OU right now is in a position where Gentry Williams, a legacy, Gentry Williams from the state, OU defense is rising. The offense looks fantastic. It's always been fantastic. You get a ton of depth back on offense. The defense, you lose some guys, but you have a ton of depth. And like I said, you look to be going in the right direction. That's a very, very hard pitch to turn down because everything is trending in the right direction. And Gentry Williams can be given the pitch of, you're the guy that comes in here with Brownlow-Dindy and y'all seal the whole thing up. You're the guys that take it to the next level. That's an enticing pitch. That's a real pitch. So I still do like OU's ability with Gentry Williams, but also on the LSU front, they just brought in recruiting specialists from Mississippi State. And while that might not sound like anything, it's already paying dividends and massive ones. As soon as he's announced to staff, he gets to work, and instantly, 5-star safety Jacoby Matthews rolling with the Tigers. We have got to watch this because not only are they pairing Corey Raymond on Gentry Williams, I'm interested to see if they get Mason Smith involved in that process at all. We're going to be updating that as it goes. We talked about Brownlow-Dindy being between a few different schools, Amari Abor as well, in between a few different schools. Both of those guys, though, and really all three of these guys look to be OU leans. Now, do I think you get all three of them? That's hard to say because of the schools you're going up against and the history those schools have at turning those positions into absolute monsters. But that being said, I do believe that the Oklahoma defense progresses, and if I guess, you get Gentry Williams plus either Brownlow-Dindy or Amari Abor. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility you land all three, but I would bet money you land two of the three, and that's what I'm thinking right now. So, back to the question before we close this video out of, do I believe that the Oklahoma Sooners can remain within the top 5 at the end of the year? And that is a maybe, and let me explain why. Because recruiting right now is incredibly interesting. When you look at the top 5, it's normal people, except for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's in there, and you see two teams that you're used to always being in the top 5, not there right now. Clemson and Alabama. Both of these teams kind of are suffering from the same thing. both institutions are kind of ran by this mindset of you don't get an offer or you don't get seriously pursued until we've had you on campus and we get to watch you camp on campus. Bama just announced their camp dates moving into summer. That's going to just massively increase the amount of prospects interested in the Alabama Crimson Tide. I fully expect the Alabama Crimson Tide to jump into the top 5 because the word on the street is that there are a few 5-star prospects that would be highly interested in giving their verbal this week, but they haven't camped at Alabama yet, and they need to, and that's going to happen this summer. But those prospects, just like I said, are very interested in a lot of different places. Clemson, the same thing with Alabama. The one thing I'm interested in with Clemson, and I really want to hear y'all's opinion on this, so hop down to the comments and let me know. Clemson has this rule where you can't, they don't like at least, if you're committed to them for you to take other visits. In fact, that's what's rumored to have lost them Corey Foreman last year, the #1 player in the nation. And so because of that, I think that's why we see this slow start to Clemson. These kids know that they're about to have visits opening up again, and they want to take full advantage of that. So committing right now to Clemson, one of the few institutions in the nation that still is ran with this mindset of once you commit to us, you don't go and visit anywhere else. You can see why kids aren't very high on committing to them right now and then not being able to take their visits. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'm wondering if that's going to affect Clemson in the long run. I'm interested to see how that works going forward. But the Oklahoma Sooners are in a phenomenal position for a top 5 recruiting class, and I think they can make it happen. I do think, though, that this year as a whole, the top 10 recruiting classes, or at least the top 7 of those 10, are going to be better as a whole than we've seen in a while. I think opening back up, having kids go out to visits, it's going to be a sense of new, refreshing, and because of that, we'll see a bit more parity at the end of the year when we're talking about the recruiting rankings. So I do believe that the Oklahoma Sooners could be in a top 5 situation. I think if they do, it might be at that number 5, but now we're splitting hairs. And here's the thing. I think if they don't end up in the top 5, you're still in a position like you were last year. If you haven't heard my opinion on your class last year, essentially it boils down to this. You had one of the best classes in all of the nation last year, but you took a small class. And right now, we have to always be mindful of that. Rankings are important, but we also have to look at why teams are ranked the way they were. OU had a completely justifiable reason last year not to be within the top 10 because they took a very small class. However, OU was easily within the top 10 if you looked at the average recruit ranking and then their work in the transfer market. My goodness gracious, they signed a top 4 class last year when you take all of that into account. Really, really special. And so I'm wondering, do you think OU does more work in the transfer? Do you think that they really like where they are recruiting right now and go with a full push on that? Can't wait to hear what y'all are thinking because the Oklahoma Sooners are absolutely surging in recruiting and it doesn't look to end. That's it. See ya.